Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Greetings, my name is Ariba Shabbir and we have been learning English language teaching. Today we are starting with a new module and this module is Structures of English Language. In this module we will cover different sessions. The first one would be based on a phonology. The second topic that we will cover will be morphology, and then we will discuss syntax and semantics. Later on we will understand the context in a language. So, as you see that the first topic that we are going to cover today is the structures of the English language, and it is phonology. Before we proceed further, let us recapitulate of what we did in the last session. So, in the last session we studied modern English, Middle English, and we also looked upon the early English that was known as Old English. And if we look up at the modern English, it is widely considered to be the lingua franca of the world. And we also studied that English has the flexibility of function and openness of vocabulary, like a word can be used as noun and the same word can also function as verb. We had taken examples like an object is on the table, tabling a plan. So, here you understood that table can be used with different functions. Similarly, we understood the concept of world Englishes which emerged in various contexts, and it came out from different parts of the world. We also understood the concept of general Indian English, which emerged when most of the Indians strongly formed linguistic habits while attempting to learn English. And we found that received pronunciation, which is also called as RP, was traditionally considered as a standard form of English. However, with the emergence of several dialects, we prefer to use our language and the pronunciation in a way we find feasible. And we also studied that it is a minor dialect and it is being spoken by no more than 5% of the population, which is in the southeast of England. After studying phonology, as I discussed in the beginning, you will be able to understand the difference between letters and sounds. You will also be able to learn the conceptual framework of consonant and vowels and their place and manner of articulation. In addition to these things, you will be able to apply general understanding of phonology, phonetics to understand the second language learners and apply these concepts to language education and learning. So, dear learners, it is important to understand that how letters emerge in English language and how they are different from sounds. So, let us take the example from our childhood days when we started learning English as a second language. I am sure your teacher gave you alphabet and he or she might have asked you to memorize it. You had gone through the series of letters A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But then what happened that when you started using those letters in composing words, you found lot of differences. In fact, you found lot of things which are being used in one way and in the different case you used in a different way. So, let us take the examples of those words where you found difficulties or your copies might have got red due to the spelling mistakes. Let's take up the example of a word chair. Okay, look up at this word and when you write chair, you see there are different letters, right? The first letter is C, the second letter is H, the third letter is A, the fourth letter is I, and the fifth letter is A. Surprisingly, you are combining two letters in order to produce a sound cha, cha, right? And you write two letters in order to give this sound. However, in the word like kite, you are not combining those two letters C and H, rather you are putting one letter which is denoting k sound. So, if you compare these two sounds, you will find that as such there is no difference in pronunciation, there is no difference in articulation, right, but the way of writing is different. Similarly, you can take up different examples, like when you write chorus, you will gradually realize that in the example chair, CH is used to produce cha sound. However, in the word like kite, ka is used, letter K is used to produce ka sound, and in the word chorus, CH again is used, but it is now producing a very different sound. So, you see a lot of discrepancy with respect to spellings in English language, and I am sure you can come up with different examples. You can recall all those words which are confusing and you found difficulty in understanding. Let us take up other examples as well. You wrote station, right? Now, what happens in the word station, that you use S, you use T, I am talking about letters here, you also use A, and then you talked about T, then you mention I, and then you mention O, followed by N. Now, think of this word and try to analyze that where have you used the combination of two letters in order to produce a very different sound. So, let us take up this example TI, fine, and in this TI you find that it is no more TI, it is rather being produced as sh, sh, sh sound, right. So, station, in the same way you produce nation, you say combination. So, what is happening over here? You are putting two letters, combining those two letters and producing a very different sound. If TI is going to present itself as sh sound, then what will happen to the combination of letters that are being produced with S and H sounds? So, let us say when you write fish, what happens here? Here you use F, you use I, you use S and you use H. Now, here you are combining S and H letter to produce sh sound, sh, sh. In English language, you can find number of examples that have been taking place. So, it is important to understand here that it is not necessary that all the letters are giving the exact articulation, they are giving the exact sound that we have been requiring. Sometimes they are coming up with the infusion of two letters, sometimes one letter is producing the sound, and sometimes the entire different aspect, the entire different combination which we have not even imagined of is coming up with a same sound. So, you have to look up at the chaos that has been taking place, and it is important to find out the reason behind this chaos and also the solution, so that we can learn English in a better way. And it's not just English, it could be any other language as well. So, understanding sound and understanding letters and the difference between these two components and how they are going to interrelate with each other are important to go through it. Let me give you another example. You might have studied in your kindergarten that there are 5 vowels, A, E, I, O, U. Let me write it down over here, A, E, I, O, U. Now, think of the usage of the language. Think of the words that you have used these vowels in so many ways, and I am sure you would have found discrepancy. I am sure you would have found that vowels are not just consigned to these 5 in number, rather they are much more. So, if you have difficulty in understanding this concept, let me tell you that you say feet, right? I am writing over here feet. So, look up at the sounds over here. Here you are using the sound f, right? And here you are using the sound t. And in between it is not just E, it is E. So, it is basically a longer vowel. So, it is important to distinguish that sometimes we use shorter E and sometimes we use the longer E. Similarly, the case happens with oo vowel as well. You say oo and then you say oo. So, there is a difference between the shorter one and the longer one. And we can take other examples as in the word apple. So, while pronouncing apple, you first come up with the expansion of your mouth and you say a sound in order to produce apple. But what would happen in the word like come? In between, in the vowel that comes in between the k and the m sound, you find it is neither a sound, it is neither a sound, it is a sound. So, it is evident here that vowels are not just confined to 5 in number, rather they are more. How many are these in number and what are their characteristics, that we will take up in the later part of this session. So far, you have understood that letters and sounds are different from each other, and you have also understood that it is not necessary that all the letters are producing the exact sound, some may and some may not. So, there were researchers who had gone through this problem and they spent nights and days to find out the alternative. As a result, we saw Daniel Jones, who came up with the idea of introducing sounds through International Phonetic Association. So, we will talk about IPA and how the symbols came up in the later part. But before that, let us quickly revise the definition of phonology that we are going to discuss: the study of sounds in a particular language or in languages generally. Since you have got the idea of how sounds are produced and how they are different from letters, so now let us separate this study and make sounds a very different and a isolated entity. So, here we are going to study the sounds of a language with reference to English. Quickly we will go through the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, which defines phonetics as a system of speech sounds of a language or a group of languages. Surprisingly and in fact interestingly as well, it is not that phonetics is consigned with English language, rather it is expanded to other languages as well. Even you can just hear Chinese and you do not understand it, but you are able to decode it by with the help of International Phonetic International Phonetic Alphabet, right. You can just transcribe it, you can exactly decode the sounds and can come up with a script. This is an interesting thing of the IPA which Daniel Jones introduced in the academia. One important aspect that was mentioned by Merriam-Webster was the study and systematic classification of the sounds. Since we are going to categorize, we are going to classify, we are going to understand their features, we are going to go through the place and the manner of articulation. Therefore, it is the systematic study of all these aspects. And we will also study that as mentioned by Merriam-Webster's dictionary, that the practical application of this science to language study. So, it will no more be a problem of chaos, rather all the problems with regard to spellings, with regard to pronunciation will be sought out. One more thing that that I would like to discuss over here is, because we will be gradually discussing and talking about phoneme. So, phoneme is is defined as any of the abstract units of the phonetic system of a language that correspond to a set of similar speech sounds, right. So, example as I have mentioned over here is p, b, k. It is not p and b, e and k, it is rather sound p and b and k, right. So, what happens like you say plant, or if I have to give you an easier word, I would say pet, right. So, what happens in pet? What are the phonemes? P is the phoneme and the t is the phoneme. These phonemes are the abstract units of the entire system, right. And you also see that the I is also mentioned over here. Let us take up the example of bat, right. So, in the word bat you see phoneme b and you see phoneme t, right. You see a as well, okay. Now, it is being mentioned as per the IPA, it should be mentioned as b and the a sound is denoted with this symbol and then t is being put over here like this, right. Now, what happens in allophone? It is being defined as one of two or more variants of the same phoneme. For example, you say please, okay. So, what happens in please? You are slightly putting up an aspiration. Now, what is aspiration? That when it is put with a little force, for example, you say please, please. So, it is coming at the first place. So, the first pa, which is the start of the syllable, is being put up with aspiration. However, when this pa comes in between the word, in between the syllable, then it is no more aspirated. You would say spin, spin. You won't say spin. That would not suit the rhythm of the language. Now, let us, in order to understand the articulation system and how our articulatory organs are involved, it is important to look up at the diagram. Look up at this diagram, you will see that lungs are responsible for producing speech sounds. How are they responsible? Let me tell you that when you inhale here and exhale here, so you know the air comes out from your mouth and that is how you give up a sound. If there were no air, I am sure you would have not been able to produce any sound. So, lungs come up as an important and essential organ of articulatory system, right. Then I would like to talk about larynx. Inside the larynx, I am sure you can, in vernacular language we say Adam's apple. So, you will find it on your neck and you can touch it and feel it as well. So, what happens in larynx, that the air passes through it, and inside the larynx you have vocal folds, also called as vocal cords. So, when the air which is being exhaled from the lungs passes through the larynx and your vocal cords are set on vibration. Sometimes the vibrations are heavier to the extent that you feel it, and sometimes the vibrations are least or they are partial as well. So, as denoted in the, as shown in the diagram, vocal folds are inside the larynx and they are being put to vibrate when the air is released from the lungs. You will come up with the roof of your mouth. Now, let us understand the roof of the mouth. So, first let me say that you have teeth, and behind your teeth there is an area which is called alveolar ridge, right. And after the alveolar ridge you find something very hard. If you touch the tip of the tongue to the roof of the mouth, just behind the alveolar ridge, as also shown in the diagram, you will see that there is hard palate, right. And hard palate is followed by soft palate, which is also called as velum. So, teeth, then you have alveolar ridge, and then it is followed by hard palate, it is further followed by soft palate, which is called velum as well. And velum plays a very important role when you produce sounds through your oral cavity, and you also produce sounds through nasal cavity. We will try to understand how nasal cavity and oral cavity performs when you come up exhaling your ear, and the air passes through your vocal cords and you produce very distinguished sounds. There is another organ that is called uvula. Right. So, uvula is useful when you produce sounds like q, q. So, these sounds can be found in the languages of India, and it is difficult, in fact it is impossible to find out any sound in English which has the usage of uvula. But yeah, it is important to understand, as it can help you to understand your articulatory system in a comprehensible way. Now, when you talk about tongue, it is important to understand that your tongue first consists of the tip. Okay. So, while producing different sounds, you bring the tip of the tongue to the different places of your mouth. You may touch your tip to the alveolar ridge, you may touch your tip to the dental, the teeth part, and you can also touch the tip of the tongue with the hard palate and even soft palate, and you can do lot of exercises and come up with different and distinguished sounds. And after the tip of the tongue, there is an area which is called blade of the tongue. Okay. So, if you experiment your tongue, the blade of the tongue with different areas, you will again see that manner of articulation and the place of articulation would go with different ways. Fine. So, that is how the rest of the tongue is, and tip and blade is often important when we talk about the place of articulation. Right. Now, when you talk about nose, it means we are talking about nasal sounds. Okay. And when our oral cavity is blocked, or it does not allow the air which is coming from the lungs to release, then the air finds its way from the nose, and therefore we come up with the sounds that have nasal texture. For example, you produce sound m. So, it finds the way. So, when we talk about the nasal cavity, then the air is stopped from the mouth, and the same air finds its passage from the nose. Sometimes what happens that this particular air is being passed through both the passages, nose and mouth. We have examples like m sound, we have a sound, we have n sound. So, these are sounds which are important to look up as far as nasal and nasalized sounds are concerned. Okay. So, look up at this diagram again. Larynx are responsible in putting up your sound, inputting vibration in your sound. Lungs, which are responsible for inhaling and exhaling air. Tongue, which comes up in contact with different parts of your vocal tract and perform important role in producing sound. Velum, again, which is also known as soft palate, is also responsible in giving up different sounds. We have nasal cave, and we have you have a jaw which keeps on moving from time to time, and also lips are responsible for exhaling air in a sudden way or in a slow way. So, we will go through with the different functions in this session, and we will try to understand these the role of these articulatory organs in a detailed manner. So, since we have understood how our oral cavity works, let me tell you that sounds are also classified into two important parts. first is consonant and the second is vowel, or you can say the first is vowel and the second is consonant. Now, what are vowels, what are consonants? So, let me begin with example. You will find you will exhale your air, right, and you feel that there is some obstruction taking place, then definitely the sound which you are going to produce or which you have been producing is basically consonant in nature. However, when there is no obstruction, when there is no constraint and the air which you are exhaling from your lungs come to your mouth and is being released without any stop, then you say that it is a vowel. So, that is what I have tried to present to you in a very comprehensible way. There are 24 consonants and 20 vowels if we look up at the sound system of English language. So, if I ask you to recall or to remember or think of consonants, then what examples would you like to give? I would definitely like to put up the sounds like p, t, b, k, okay, sh. Remember these symbols that I have been trying to put up over here is taken from IPA, International Phonetic Association, and IPA has designated a symbol for each sound. So, similarly you have the sound which I am putting up here in this form. You have sh sound as denoted here. You have many more sounds as well, m sound, so n sound, okay. So, these all are consonants. If I ask you to come up with examples of vowel sounds, then what would it be? I will say a sound, which is being denoted like this, a sound, and then we have a sound, right. We also have a longer a sound, and we can talk about u sound. Then in the vowel again we have the longer u, which is being denoted with a diacritic. So, when I am using two dots, it means I am using a diacritic to denote that this particular sound is being put up for a longer time. Now, here this you see, and as you can see in this slide, this is the chart of the International Phonetic Alphabet, which was revised to 2005, and it represents consonant sounds. So, let us quickly go through some of the examples of the consonant sounds. Here we have p sound, b sound, t sound, d sound, right, m sound, a sound, and you have a y sound and j sound, y sound. So, there is a difference when you talk about these sounds. Let us say j sound, as in the word jug, j. You also have observed that this j is slightly produced with a friction, and you come up with the saying j sound, as in the word like vision. So, it is important to distinguish that it is not vision, it is vision, and j is being differentiated from the sound j. In this chart, you see k sound, g sound, a sound, r sound, sh sound, v sound, v sound, okay, and so on. So, you will find different types of consonants, and you will see that on the left hand side it is written plosive, nasal, trill, flap, fricative, lateral fricative, approximant, lateral approximant, which talks about the manner of articulation. And if you see this chart in a horizontal way, you will find that it is written bilabial, labiodental, dental, alveolar, post-alveolar, retroflex, palatal, velar, uvular, pharyngeal, glottal. Okay. Now, these bilabial, labiodental, all the technical words that you have been hearing are basically denoting the manner of articulation, and I am going to talk about the manner and the place of articulation in the next slide. So, now we will talk about the place of articulation of consonants. So, you will encounter that there are sounds which are considered bilabial. So, what happens in bilabial, that you release, you try to release the air, but there is a blockage, there is a closure. So, which organs are involved in closing your articulatory organs? So, those are lips. So, lips are responsible in restricting the air which is coming out from your lungs. If you try to produce p sound, so you will see that your upper lip and the lower lip is coming in contact with each other, and as a result the air is being obstructed, it is being stopped for a while, and then you suddenly exploded to produce this sound. Now, in the second one you see labiodental. Labiodental means that there are sounds which are articulated with lower lip touching the upper front teeth. So, your lower lip raises towards the upper front teeth, and then you find that there is an obstruction taking place. When you separate both the organs, then you realize that the air is being further released, and you result in producing sounds like f, and then you produce sounds like f. Okay. So, while pronouncing f, you see that your lower lip goes towards the teeth and it touches it, right. It is in a way that it is obstructing the air, and the articulation takes place. Similarly, you can come up with other examples as well. W, w, w. So, what happens in w sound, that again the lower lip is coming in contact with the front teeth and resulting in the production of this sound. Now, dental. What happens in the dental sound, that tongue plays an important role over here, and the upper teeth is also involved in the production of this sound, right. So, it basically blocks the passage, and you result in producing the sound like ta, 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 da, da, da. So, if you realize the articulation in a if you realize the articulation, you will find that ta, that while pronouncing ta, you are involving your tongue, the tip of the tongue, and you are also touching the tip of the tongue with the dental area, with the teeth of your mouth. With the you are touching the tip of the tongue with the upper teeth, and therefore you are coming up with the sounds like ta, ta, ta. You can also repeat after me, da, da, da. So, the tip which is at the point of your tongue touches the upper teeth and results in producing ta, ta, ta and da, da, da sound. Coming up with the next place of articulation, which is indicated here as alveolar sound. So, in alveolar, what happens, that tongue come close to the alveolar ridge, okay, which is the back of the teeth, and it is the area which lies which connects the teeth with the mass, right. So, you touch that area and you produce the sound, okay, like you say ta, ta, da, da. While producing these consonant sounds, you feel that the blade of your tongue touches the roof of the mouth. Now, what is the roof over here? It is the hard palate, which comes right before the alveolar ridge. So, you can try after me and produce sounds like ch, 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 j, j, and j, but this j is different from ch, j. Fine. So, I am denoting here with the IPA symbol ch, okay, j, sh, okay, sh, as I have already put it over here. Fine. Now, we will also now let us understand what retroflex sounds do. It is very interesting. Retroflex involves the tip of the tongue in such a way that while pronouncing it starts rolling. So, let us say R. So, what happens that your tongue comes in front and then it rolls. As a result, you produce sound R. Fine. So, this is retroflex in English. R is the example that we can take up over here. Now, coming up with the palatal a place of articulation. So, in palatal sound there is an involvement of blade or front of the tongue with the hard palate, and you produce sound like ya, ya. It is important to note over here is that while pronouncing ya, ya as in the word like yes, you are not what happens in the ya sound as in the word yes. So, what you do, you bring two articulatory organs together, and those are the tongue and the soft palate, and the area between the soft and the hard palate, yeah, and you try to bring close, but you are not fully obstructing the area. As a result, the air which is coming from your lungs find difficulty in passing through, and therefore you result you come up with producing a very distinguished sound, and that is yeah, yeah. You can repeat after me as well. What happens in velar sounds? So, in velar, as I told you in the beginning as well, velar or velum is a organ which is also known as soft palate. So, you know, when you go back in your vocal tract, you will find that after the hard palate there is another area which is soft, and it is velum, it is soft palate. So, many sounds are being produced when you raise the velum and when you lower the velum. So, velar sounds involve the back of the tongue raising or touching the soft palate. In the word like ka, 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 so you see that it is not the hard palate which is involved, and it is neither the teeth nor the alveolar ridge, rather your tongue approaches to soft palate. Now, after understanding the place of articulation, it is also important to understand the manner of articulation which is involved in producing distinguished sounds. Okay, so let us look up at this slide and find that what does stop means. Stop are basically known as plosive, and in plosive or in stop you realize that there is the closure of the articulatory organs to obstruct the air stream. So, the air is passing, you know, the passage is being created, fine. So, what happens that the air is completely stopped. At that point of time you say that the manner of articulation is stop or it is plosive. You suddenly open those articulatory organs or separate it in order to produce those sounds. Now, we can take the example of fricatives also. In fricative, what happens that the sound in fricatives, what happens that the articulatory organs are close to closure, are close to stop, but they are not really closed. So, when you produce sounds like f, f, or when you produce a sound like w, 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 then what happens that you try to bring two articulatory organs together, but you are not fully blocking those fully blocking the space, you are not fully blocking the passage. As a result, the air passes through the area and produce and come up with a sound. So, you can also try pronouncing sound and sound, right. You can also try articulating z. What happens while pronouncing z sound? You are bringing two articulatory organs, but there is a passage which is very near to closure, which is close almost but not fully blocked. Now, what happens in affricate? That it begins with a stop, but it releases as a fricative. So, you can take up the example of sounds where we say ch, ch, ch. So, you say that it is a stop first, but then you also realize that when it is separated, so air is being closed and they are very much close to the closure. If I have to take up more examples of affricate, I would say with cha there comes j, j, okay, j, j and cha and sh also, which can be taken up as examples of affricate. Now, coming up to the nasal as a manner of articulation, then it is interesting to know that it it actually provides a passage to the air which is coming from the lungs, and the passage which this manner provides is the includes the involvement of nose. The air is blocked, or you can say it is not allowed to come through nose, rather it comes in nasal sounds. What happens that there is a release of air, and there is a closure, or you can say that the air is not allowed to pass through the oral cavity, rather it finds the passage through the nose. So, the examples that you can take up over here is m sound. You can also think of n sound, and sound as in the word like sing, as in the word like ring. Okay, so you are not pronouncing m sound and also not producing n sound. It is somehow the texture of the nasal cavity. Then there is another manner of articulation that is known as liquid. So, what happens in liquid sounds, that partial closure takes place in the mouth, resulting in a resonance. So, you can say la, la, la. In liquid sounds, what happens that the articulatory system are trying to come in contact with the other organ, and the meeting take place, but the air is not at all obstructed, rather it is released through its way. So, the example that you can take up here is l sound, r sound. So, manner of articulation and place of articulation are distinctive, and they are important to learn different types of sounds when it comes to International Phonetic Association. Then there is another important concept that is being placed in the manner of articulation is glide. What happens? Glide is very much similar to a vowel, but it is not a vowel. Let us say yes. When you say yes, you will feel that it is a partial consonant, right. So, it does not come under the category of vowel, but it has a texture of consonance. So, I would say that glide represents y sound in the word like yes, or you can say w in the word like wheat, in the word like west. Yes, so these are glide. Interestingly, you will find that while producing sounds, you can easily categorize into voiced and voiceless sounds. So, I will give you a small activity to do. You can place both of your hands on your ears and you can block your ears and produce s sound, as in the word suit. Okay. So, I will also do and you can repeat after me. Now, while producing this sound, just think of your articulation, think of the vocal organs that are involved in producing s sound, and think what changes are taking place when the air is being released and a pressure is taking place in your mouth. Fine. And in the same way, try to produce z sound. Okay, so let us try this. Now, after articulating these two sounds, you will find a lot of difference. Can you think of that difference? What was the difference, though the manner, or you can say the place of articulation was same? It was the difference of being voiced and unvoiced sound. So, how do you understand a sound with respect to its nature of being voiced or unvoiced? If I have to alter this activity, I can also ask you to put your two fingers on your vocal cords, on your larynx, voice box, and say s, also say z sound. So, what you will feel that in the former sound there is no vibration. However, in the later sound you find that a heavy pressure in the form of vibration is taking place, right. So, that is how we are classifying voiced sound and unvoiced sound. You can take up other examples also, b, b, v, and you can think of t, t, t. You can also do the same experiment with other sounds like the, sh, sh, m, m, like this, and you can easily distinguish where your vocal cords are vibrating. I would not say that vocal cords are not completely are not vibrating at all, but yeah, I would say at least they are in the position of least vibration. Since we have studied consonants throughout this session, let us also think of vowels. So, what are the nature of vowels? Let me tell you that they are basically divided into round vowels and unrounded vowels. So, it is important to study vowels as well, since we have gone and through since we have studied consonants. Now, it is important to throw light on vowel sounds as well. So, when we talk about vowels, we cannot forget that they are being classified into rounded vowels and unrounded vowels. So, if you say oat, right, I am writing over here as well in this slide. When you say oat, you see that your lips are being rounded in order to produce this rounded vowel, while there are words where you use vowels with unrounded manner. So, how can you do that? For example, you say come, okay. So, do you say comb? If you say comb, then you will be able to realize that in comb the vowel O is rounded. Rounded means that your upper and the lower lip gets rounded while articulation, while producing this sound. But what happens in the word like come, you are not rounding your vowels, rather they become slim in such a way that you produce a sound, in the word like come, a sound. Similarly, when you say oat, so you are rounding your lips and producing vowel. So, that is how we differentiate between rounded and unrounded vowels. Now, in vowels there is one more category, and this category comes in two forms. Some scholars have put up the third category, triphthong, but here it is, here let us focus on monophthong and diphthong. After knowing that what is rounded and what is unrounded vowels it's important to say in other words as well that rounded vowels include the circular circular positioning of lips. However, in unrounded vowels there is a relaxation to the extent that you don't round your lips and you produce it in a very easier way. Now, we have also one more categorization, that is monophthong and diphthong, although many scholars have talked about triphthong, but here I think at this stage it is important to just go through the monophthong and diphthong, because these two concepts are important as far as Indian context is concerned. In monophthong, as you see in this slide, in a monophthong there is the involvement of only one vowel. Okay, so there is involvement of only one vowel. If I have to take up the example of monophthong, I would say that there is a word called put, right? There is a word called boot, okay? There is a word called food. Fine. So, what happens in put? You are producing only one vowel sound, okay. You are not mixing up two vowels and you are also not mixing up three vowels. It is just the one pure vowel that you are coming up. As you say put, it is this oo sound which is important to articulate over here. Similarly, if you come up with other sounds, as in the word boot, you say that there is a very purity in pronouncing oo sound. It does not encompass the involvement of other vowels. You do not say boat. If you say boat, then the meaning would get different, but it is boot. So, it is oo sound without the interference of any other vowel, and it is pure in nature and it is in continuation. Similarly, if you see the example of food, again there is involvement of only one vowel and there is no other vowel which is coming in between. So, when there is the involvement of only one vowel and they are mono in nature, then we say that this vowel is actually a monophthong. On the contrary, you see that there are diphthongs. So, what happens in diphthong? As the name suggests, di, di, diphthong. So, di involves two vowels, right. So, in RP pronunciation we pronounce go as go. It is not go. In Indian, in general Indian English, we say it is go, it is so because of our articulatory system which is habitual in pronouncing certain words in a very apt way. But let me tell you that in Risi pronunciation, and I remember in the discussion as well, we talked about that it is so. So, it is o and oo, so and go, like that way. If I have to take up a very prominent example of diphthong, I can say that you can think of cry, okay. You can think of cry. Now, what happens in cry? You actually write k, you r, and I. Think of this. So, in this, see the transcription over here, cry, cry. So, there is involvement of and e, cry, cry. It is not kra, it is not kri, it is cry. So, there is no consonant coming in between two vowels. The two vowels are coming in continuation and the shift takes place from one vowel to the other and it becomes very interesting to pronounce. Cry. Similarly, you can take up the example of my. Again in my, you pronounce ma sound, then there is a vowel a sound and there is another vowel which is so if I ask you to think of examples when it comes to diphthong, then what would you give? Think of words which have the conjunction of two vowels and there is no interference of the consonant, of any consonant in between. So, let us take up the example of cry, okay. So, what happens in cry? You will realize that there is a sound of ka, then there is a sound of ra then there is a sound of and then you take a shift and make it I. That is E, right. So, a glide is taking place, a shift is taking place, I, two vowels are coming together and both the vowels are given importance in this word, right. And similarly, you can think of other examples like my. When you say my, how would you write as how would you transcribe it, or how would you represent it with International Phonetic Alphabet? I would say that ma sound is coming, then I would think of a sound, and then again it is e sound. If you look up at these two sounds, it means that two vowels are coming close in conjunction with each other, supporting each other, adjusting each other, that both the vowels are giving their presence and you produce my. Similarly, you can think of the example lay. It's not lay, it's lay. So, it's a and lay. So, diphthongs basically refer diphthongs refer to the concept of the two vowels that come close to each other. In phonetic transcription, what happens that we decode sounds, we decode language with respect to its pronunciation, and that is how we save it, we take it as an evidence. So, there is a procedure for that. You need to learn IPA symbols. I will prescribe the book which is quite prominent and popular. Let me give you example of how phonetic transcription takes place. So, I would say if you are writing a word, let us say water. So, this water is denoting 5 letters W, A, T, E, R, but when you transcribe it, you will see that w sound is being produced. Then you will see o sound is produced. It is not a, it is o. So, wa. So, o sound is being represented with this symbol, and then you will realize that there is t sound which is being denoted as with this symbol. Then there is not e and it is not a, it is rather a sound, a very shorter one, a sound, and this is being denoted like this. Now, it is being said that that ra is being not pronounced. So, you won't say water, rather you say water. So, that is how the transcription of water takes place. When you transcribe it, you do not look up at its spelling, rather you just look up how it is being pronounced. So, while pronouncing water, we do not say water. If had ra been realized, I would have mentioned ra, but here ra is not realized. That is why I am omitting ra and just putting a sound, making it water. Right. Similarly, you can take up other examples like color. So, the spelling of color would be C-O-L-O-U-R, right. But when you transcribe it, you will see k, then then l, then color, and again it is not color, it is color. Ra is not realized, it is skipped, and that is what phonetic transcription is all about. So, whatever you hear, you denote it, you write it, you indicate it. That is a crux of any transcription of any language, not just English. You can transcribe Chinese, you can transcribe German, French, any of the Indian languages, you can do it very easily. So, this will help you to become better in learning and teaching language. In the last, let us quickly go through the concept of assimilation and elision. It is the integral concepts of phonology. When you talk about, as you see in the slide, when you talk about assimilation, we generally refer to the changing of a sound due to the influence of the neighboring sound. So, if I have to write an example, I will say handbag. So, how would you pronounce handbag? Do you say handbag or do you say handbag? Handbag. So, what I am trying to, the pitch that I am trying to make over here is that the is not realized, rather it gets influenced by its neighboring sounds, right, and it is no more the cluster, it is no more the combination of 3 consonants n, d and b. One is skipped and therefore the 2 sounds are realized and you say handbag, handbag, handbag. Fine. When it comes to elision, let me tell you that elision, as indicated in the slide, it is basically used to smooth the rhythm of the language and it eases the pronunciation of words. So, if you say what elision is, I would say that certain sounds are being omitted. I will say certain sounds are being omitted. So, if you pronounce word aspirin, do you say aspirin or it is aspirin? Aspirin. So, I am writing over here as well, it is aspirin. However, the spelling of this particular word is aspirin. Right, but this E sound is being omitted here. So, this is the process of elision. Even in the phrases also you say I don't know, I don't know, it gets shorter. You say chocolate or you say chocolate. So, this O sound which comes in between chocolate is no more in use, rather it is chocolate. And further, if I have to transcribe it, I would say, please repeat. Further, I have to transcribe it, I would say ch, o, then k, right, then there is a diphthong lay, and then t. That is how it is being pronounced as. It is no more chocolate, it is chocolate. Right, so you can come up with different examples. It is no more mathematics, it is mathematics, right. It is no more temperature, it is temperature, right. Similarly, I am sure you can gather up many examples from your surroundings. So, dear learners, in this session we have studied phonology and we have tried to understood that phonology is an important component of linguistics and it is an integral to language teaching and learning. Similarly, we have understood that the aim of the phonology is to discover the principles like how a sound is produced, how a manner of articulation is involved, how the obstructions take place, how the air is released and what sounds do we produce when we experiment our articulatory systems with different types of positioning. Right, we have also gone through the glimpse of International Phonetic Alphabet, which gives sounds and it is now easier to decode any language of the world and put up in a system. Right, and we have gone through the phonemic awareness and we have understood certain phonological skills. If they are being practiced nicely and if they are being learned nicely, then a learner is likely to become efficient in pronunciation. So, with this we have come to an end of this session. In the next session we will discuss morphology. Thank you very much.